welcome to Sarah's Stamping Retreat. Today I'm going to be showing you different ways that you can add some shine to your embossing folders. And for this video we're going to be using quite a lot of the Spellbinders club kits for me. We're going to be focusing on the embossing folders. So we've got this one which is just kind of a pattern, and then we've got this one which is full of leaves. So this is the 3D embossing folder and this is the embossing folder of the month. So for my first card, we are going to use the embossing folder of the month, and we're going to use one of my favourite techniques to add the shine, and that is heat emboss letterpress technique. So I'm just adding some of this Wow Embossing ink refill. It's actually the mixed media brush to my acrylic block, but that could be any kind of craft surface that you can wipe off afterwards. And then I'm going to grab my brayer, I'm going to ink that up. So I'm looking for that to get quite shiny all over. You can see that's nice and shiny now. So then I'm going to add that to the front of this embossing folder. So the front is the bit where the Spellbinders is. And you don't want to press down too much because you only want it to go on the raised bits of the embossing folder. So then I've got a piece of this dark green cardstock, and I'm going to pop this in, and then I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine. So then you can see that transferred ink onto there, and I always do these panels a bit bigger than they need to be because you often get some bits where it doesn't transfer properly, which is probably because I've not inked it up properly, but it's really difficult to see when you're inking it up how well it's done. So then I'm going to grab my Polished Gold Superfine Embossing Powder from Wow, and I'm going to cover this in there. So then I'm going to heat that up. So then you can see we've got this really pretty panel, and this bit along here where it didn't ink up very well didn't turn out great, but this bit here is really beautiful, and that's the bit that we'll use for our card. So then for the focal point, I'm going to use the really cute die of the month, and this is my favourite of the clubs for this month. It's really sweet. So I'm just going to make up these little birds, and I'm going to fast forward through it so that you can see how they're made up, but you obviously don't want to watch it in real time. I'm just going to pop a little bit of green behind there so that the green shows through his feathers a little bit. And that's just a piece of green that I've cut myself, that's not part of the dies. So there's that cute little one. And then for the toucan, it's worth noting that there's a choice of two beaks. So you've got this one with a stripy beak that we're going to use, but you also get this one with a solid beak if you want to use that instead. And then there's this one, and I just think they're so cute. So then I just want a small sentiment from this, so I'm going to use this thanks from the stamp set of the month. So then I'm going to heat emboss that with gold embossing powder onto this dark green cardstock so that it ties in with our background. So then I'm going to cut around that. So then I've cut this line circle and this gold frame using this Franz Frames die set, which is really useful because it has loads of different shapes of frames in it. I'm going to glue those together, and then I'm going to just create like a little scene on this with my birds. words and the thanks up on foam pads. So then I've got a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch dark green card blank, and I've cut our panel down to 1/4 of an inch smaller than this. And then I'm just going to glue on our little bird topper. And then I think that looks super cute. So then for our third card, we're going to use a different inky technique. But for the second card, we're going to use the same technique, but just step it up a little bit. So I'm going to use my embossing ink again. And this is really useful with the paintbrush end, just for adding that onto there. And then I'm going to ink this up again. And I'm going to use this Tropical Leaf 3D embossing folder this time. So I'm just going to ink that up, and again I'm making sure I've got the spellbinders here, so I'm inking up the front. And then I'm going to pop this through my die cutting machine with some white cardstock. So then we've got this really cool deep embossing, and then I'm going to add on some of that same gold embossing powder we used for the last one. So then I'm going to cut this down. So I've cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. I'll probably cut it down further than that when I make my card up, but I want to give myself the flexibility of having the whole card panel in case I need it. But I wanted to cut it down before I colour it, because I'm going to colour it all now and I don't want to waste that colouring on pieces I'm going to cut off. So for this I'm going to use my Karin markers. So I'm just going over with my blender pen first, and then I'm just going to add some colour directly from the marker onto here in the darkest places. And then I'm going to mix it with my blender pen. So you can see if I put the two pens together like that, you can see the colour seeping into the blender pen, and then that gives me a bit of flexibility because it means I can put it on. I'm going to get like a darker colour first, and then once that's seeped out, it's going to go to a lighter colour. And then you get this kind of nice effect where it kind of pulls out the colours. So then I absolutely love how that came out. And I was actually going to use this as a background for a card, but I've decided to make it into the feature because I really love it so much. So I've cut this down to 1/2 inch smaller than my card front. I've cut a piece of gold cardstock 1/8 of an inch bigger. I'm using a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch dark green card front. And I'm going to use my Better Press for my sentiment, just because I really like this Be Wild and Free on Your Birthday from the Better Press of the Month this month. But I'm going to heat emboss it rather than doing kind of like a normal letterpress. So if you don't have a Better Press, then just heat emboss whatever sentiment you have on hand. So like I say, I'm just heat embossing. So I'm going to ink this up with my embossing ink, not with my Better Press ink, and then run that through my die cutting machine. And that's really off centre, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to cut it out anyway. Then I'm going to heat emboss that in gold to match back with our background. So I think the fun thing as well with the Better Press plates is that when you use them with the embossing powder, because the Better Press presses the paper in and kind of like debosses it, then the embossing powder sits into that deboss. So when you've heat embossed it, it kind of sits flat with the paper instead of having that raised look you normally get with heat embossing. So it looks almost a little bit like foiling. And obviously don't forget you can foil with your Better Press plates as well. So then I want to use my Modern Oval dies to cut this out, but it's obviously far too long. I don't want that whole big thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to die cut it like this, and then afterwards we'll slide it up and die cut it again. So I'll show you that in a second. So now I've cut that like that. And then what I'm going to do to shorten this is just slide it up, and then I'm going to recut it with this at the bottom. And then now we've got this that fits our sentiment better. So then I want a gold piece to go round it. So I've cut the gold piece with the die that's one size bigger, and then I want that to go like that. So then I need to place this round here. I think that needs to go about there. So then I'll die cut that like that. So then now that I've got all my pieces ready, I can layer them all up. So then I'm going to pop the sentiment up on foam pads. And then I think that's really pretty, really shiny with that colouring coming through as well. So then for my final card, I'm going to take a piece of white cardstock that I've embossed with the embossing folder of the month, and I'm going to use the deboss side this time. And again, I'm using a piece that's much bigger than I actually need. And I'm going to take my gold ink pad and I'm just going to run that across there. And I'm going to try not to press down too hard so that it's just catching the top. You will get a little bit down, but I want to try and catch the top as much as possible and not so much of the bottom. You want a nice light hand so that it doesn't go down that bottom bit. And this is a really old gold ink pad. If I can find it in stock anywhere, then I'll link it below. But there's loads of gold ink pads out there. So now you can see we've got that really nice gold shine to there. And then for the focal point for this card, I'm using this stitching die of the month. So I've cut these leafy pieces twice, once in the dark green and once in the bright green. And then I've used these two pieces together to cut this bit to stitch. And then I've used this piece to cut this dark green piece. And I like that this stitching bit comes in two pieces, so you could just use this bit and have plain yellow behind there. You can use this bit to create an aperture, that kind of thing. So there's lots of ways to do that. And you could actually stitch this into your card front as well, because you don't have to use it with the outside piece. So you can see I've done most of the stitching on here. It's all this kind of flower pattern that you see on a lot of the Spellbinders stitching dies. So all we're going to do is we're going to go up one of the outside pieces of this circle and into the middle, up the outside and into the middle. I'm just using tone on tone. It'd be nice if you used a gold. You could go really like cool wild colours as well, like why not try hot pink on it or something and look really cool. So I'm just going to go all the way around this circle, going up the outside and into the middle. And I'm using 2 strands of embroidery silk for this. And then I can just thread that through some of these stitches at the back just to hold my thread. So then I've got that piece. Then I can glue this piece over the top, and you can see that looks really cool then because it's got all that texture inside those areas. And then I'm going to use this one as the base, and then you can see there's areas where there's none of those kind of lines on it, and that's the areas where these pieces go. And also these pieces that you can add on top, I don't feel like it needs those. So then I don't feel like I really want a big sentiment for this. So I'm just going to use this little thanks from the stamp of the month again. I'm going to heat emboss that in gold. So then I can just add on all my layers. I've cut these down to the same size I cut the last ones down to. So this piece is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. The gold piece that I'm just gluing it onto is 1/8 of an inch bigger than that. And then I've got a 4¼ by 5½ inch card blank again. So then I'm going to add some fine pads behind my pineapple and my sentiment. And then there's my finished card. I think that's really nice with all the different textures of the sewing, the embossing, nice and shiny as well. So then there are all 3 of today's cards. Please do let me know in the comments below which is your favourite. I really hope that you enjoyed creating them with me and got some ideas for adding some glimmer to your cards. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd really appreciate you clicking like below, and you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I've got a new video available. All of the products that I've used for today's cards are listed in the description below, and there's also a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.